It's 1951 and India's first Chief Justice, Sir Hiralal J.K. Sundas Kania, dies of a heart attack while in office at age 61. The question was, though, who would be the next Chief Justice of India? Hello and welcome. My name is Priya Mirza, and this podcast is the longest constitution, and we talk about the constitution, rights, institutions, jurisprudence, and what connects it all is our everyday lives. And what we have been talking about in the last few episodes is who appoints the judges to the higher courts in India. And in the Constituent Assembly, after some debate, the Assembly decided that the president, that's the executive government, would appoint the judges of the Supreme Court after consultation with judges of the Supreme Court and High Court, provided that the Chief Justice of India shall be consulted in all appointments except his own. And that's Article 124, Part 2. But what about the Chief Justice? So who amongst the 7 judges, so that's the number of judges the Supreme Court started out with, would be the next Chief Justice? How did Nehru's government decide that? Tricky matters. And that takes us to what we are looking at today. Judicial independence, malls and slums in Delhi, and contempt of court. So let's get to our first story today. Arundhati Roy, who has featured in multiple episodes so far and has written about several pressing issues. India's nuclear tests, Shekhar Kapoor's misogynistic account of Poolan Devi in his movie by reducing her life to a gang rape. That is a brilliant essay. People do read it. It's called The Great Indian Rape Trick. The Delhi Ceiling Drive, among scores of other matters. She is a writer. She writes. The year is 2002 and this time Arundhati Roy critiques a judgment about the Narmada Dam. The government is building a dam which displaces hundreds of villagers and villages, and Arundhati Roy has an opinion about the Supreme Court judgment which upholds building that dam. She also protests outside the Supreme Court. So a citizen, a writer, is using her constitutionally guaranteed freedom of expression, but the Supreme Court takes suo motu action against her. So suo motu translated into Hindi would be apne aap, by the way. So we remember in the DC Saxena case, contempt of court was broadened to include, and I quote, all acts which bring the court into disrepute or disrespect or which offend its dignity or its majesty or challenge its authority. So even disrespect qualified as contempt of court. So let's return to nuisance laws and slum dwellers. In the last episode, we looked at how an RWA president filed a case about slum dwellers, and the court held that if people were setting up jhuggies and defecating in open fields, municipal authorities were responsible. The court didn't target the slums, but the public authorities who had failed in their duties to construct public toilets. And do you remember the Republic Day special that we did? We looked at this case called the Olga Tellis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation 1985, where the Supreme Court affirmed the right of pavement dwellers not to be evicted under Article 21. But now, the year is 2000 and the city is New Delhi. And a petition is filed in the Supreme Court by Almitra Patel, which bemoans that the historic city of Delhi, the capital of India, is one of the most polluted cities in the world. True. The city is virtually an open dustbin. True. And this petition was about solid waste management. That piles of garbage and shit, which we Dilliwalas, or if you're living in any Indian city actually, see every day. So what did the Supreme Court do in this petition? And what happened when the Chief Justice of India, Kania, died in office in 1951? So interestingly, Nehru was in favor of appointing Justice B.K. Mukherjee, but Mukherjee wasn't the senior most judge. So rather than appointing the government's favorite, the executive stuck to the convention that the senior most judge of the Supreme Court must be appointed as the Chief Justice. That's important. So this is a convention established since then. Meanwhile, as we saw, as far as the constitutional interpretation of Article 124, which is where we stopped last, was that the court actually said that the government must have a primacy in appointing judges. This, by the way, was also known as the first judge's case, the S.P. Gupta case. In 1993, though, the Supreme Court's Advocates on Record Association, that SCARA, filed a petition about this. And what happened to Arundhati Roy? In the contempt of court case against Arundhati Roy 2002, the court charged her with contempt of court, of course. It accused Roy of trying, and I quote here, to cast an injury to the public by creating an impression in the mind of the people of this backward country regarding the integrity, ability, and fairness of the institution of the judiciary. It noted Roy's failure to apologize for her behavior and complained she hadn't behaved like a reasonable man. Arundhati Roy was then sentenced to jail for a day and was fined rupees 2,000. But hold on, it gets better. The court also reminded her that it was being magnanimous in its sentencing just for a day because Arundhati Roy is a woman? What? And in Almitra Patel versus Union of India 2000, the Supreme Court said, yeah, Delhi is a dirty city. Yeah, keeping Delhi clean is not an easy task, but it's not an impossible one either. Yeah, what we need is initiative, selfless zeal, and dedication and professional pride, elements which are sadly lacking here. And then it jumped to, instead of slum clearance, there is slum creation in Delhi. This in turn gives rise to domestic waste being strewn on open land in and around the slums. This can best be controlled, at least in the first instance, by preventing the growth of slums. It is the garbage and solid waste generated by these slums which require to be dealt with most expeditiously. And to quote Ghertner from this deeply insightful book about the remaking of New Delhi, you'll find the references at the bottom as always. The court proposed a new solution to garbage and solid waste management. Waste generated by these slums can be dealt with by preventing the growth of slums. Simple. Perspectives change. Slum dwellers whose life was at risk turned into posing a risk to people who lived in affluent residential areas. So, who appoints judges anyway? On that question, in the Supreme Court Advocates on Record Association versus Union of India 1993, S.P. Gupta was reversed and the majority held that the primacy in the matter of appointment of judges to the superior courts must be vested with the judiciary. It is the Chief Justice of India and his consultees in the superior judiciary who are to select in consultation with the executive the next Chief Justice of India. And thereby this verdict created the collegium, a group of the senior most judges of the Supreme Court. And I have not forgotten our Aadhaar journey, by the way, but in today's episode, it's going to be one tantalizing sentence, which is, in September 2016, the government introduced the Aadhaar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidies, Benefits and Services 2016 as a money bill in Parliament. Okay, one more sentence. The Aadhaar bill was anything but a money bill. So what was going on? Today's takeaways are, in the Arundhati Roy case, the court equated criticism of the court with lowering the reputation of the court and allowed for criminalization of speech that is critical of the courts. Slum dwellers were held to be an obstruction to the beautification of Delhi. In the second judge's case, the Supreme Court created a collegium, the senior-most judges of the court, and the collegium came into being without actually finding a mention in the text of the constitution. Lastly, Nehru's government exercised self-restraint and appointed M. Patanjali Shastri as the second Chief Justice of India and upheld the convention of appointing the senior-most judge as the Chief Justice. That's all for today, gentle listeners. If you have questions or comments, please send them in via email. That's thelongestconstitution@gmail.com. You can also rate my podcast at Spotify and drop a review at Apple Podcasts, and can reach out to me on Twitter, where I am at FundamentallyP, or on Instagram, The Longest Constitution. Until next time, this is me, Priya Mirza, signing out.